Very fortunate again this morning to have the representatives on this panel with us. We have, in our planning sessions, taken a look at what would be valuable for sharing. And today's panel is divided into three segments of our lives, really. We have Ruth and Anna, who will represent women in the Institute who have concluded their work, professional lives, and are continuing their work in other arenas, no longer for pay. Then we have Mary Ann and Irene, who will represent the middle years, those who have been working for a long time and in some instances have a second career in their lives. And then lastly, we have Jane and Kathy, who will be talking about what it is to live in today's world, in the work world. So we're very happy to turn it over to the panel, beginning first with Ruth.
Well, good morning to each of you. If you can't hear me, Jane, just put up your hand. And she put her hand up. No, it's a real joy to be here and to once again relive the moments of grace of the past and to thank God for the present and for the future. We heard yesterday Sister Claire speak about language, and we've heard Father Paul make a few references to it. And I reflected when I heard Sister Claire first about a young 7-year-old friend that I have who comes to visit and usually brings her sister and a couple of other playmates, and they're not there 5 minutes before they say, "We came for ice cream." I tried to steer them away from that and say, "Well, come to see me." Well, one day, the 7-year-old and I were sitting side by side on the Davenport, and please note the word, because the second story relates to that. But this little tyke and I were sitting, and I said, "Idea." And she said, "Ruth," Grandma Ruth, because that's what they call me, and that took us a bit of getting used to. But she said, "That's not how to say it." And I said, "How do you say it?" She says, "Idea." Well, you heard about the Glow Girls and the Low Girls. And the Low Girls were very, very good to this New Englander who had thought she lost all of her accent. Once in a while you'll find an R that creeps in, or the word law, Elsa, something like that. The second story is that I was very brave about 5 years ago and invited a 10-year-old grandniece into my home for a week. I picked her up in Ohio. We had 300 miles of driving together, and there was a lot of language that flowed between us. What I didn't know was going to happen was that she spent every night calling her mother to get an interpretation of language. The first call said, "What is a Davenport?" She says, "I'm going to sleep on it." I need say no more. But on the evening of March 17th this year, I was launched into a rewarding preparation for these 7 minutes. When Emma Roper celebrated St. Patrick's Feast Day, one of her favorites, with an invitation to address this first question: what is it like to be a woman today? And I ignored all of the categories of retired, semi-retired, etc., as I thought this through. A lot of it I thought through on the highway, where I've driven 50 to 100 miles in the last few weeks. But anyway, what is it like to be a woman today? In my research, I interviewed 2 mothers, both were retired teachers, and one of whom has written 35 children's books. My initial response to the question was that today's woman faces unlimited horizons or opportunities in a milieu of cultural expectations. This was borne out in the thrust of these friends as they identified numerous work choices, some but not all in the professions. Many women choose to enter the workforce, as witnessed by Linda Finch, who on that March 17th began her retracing of Amelia Earhart's flight around the world. She has excited school kids in Dakar and Singapore and elsewhere when she has communicated with them by computer from her plane. We also are aware of the role of women in our American culture, in the arts, in corporate leadership, in politics, such as the Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, in the sciences, and also within a week or so ago, the election of the first woman in 150 years to be president of the American Medical Association.
Wow.
Also, we turn to the meteorologist for weather reports in the morning, probably to determine what we want to wear. And women in each of the professions, as indicated by this group, certainly, serve as well. These persons have demonstrated that one could have a life of fulfillment and achievement outside of the home. Such also was Nancy Woodhull, a founding editor of USA, who died recently. She had also been a senior vice president of the Washington-based Freedom Forum, a nonpartisan, nonprofit media organization. So women today, ourselves included, often seek work, well no, not ourselves included in this statement, but women today often seek work along with their role as mothers and homemakers. It is to be remembered, however, that sometimes two paycheck households exist, often because of a family's desire for a higher standard of living, and that in part is influenced by consumerism and materialism in our culture. That is not to say that self-giving is absent in the lives of these women. Today, young women often delay marriage until early or mid-30s. The daughter of one of my interviewees proclaimed that she owns a car, owns a house, has a teaching position with children Monday through Friday, and therefore does not find her nurturing tendencies demanding marriage as it did with her own mother a generation ago. Frankly, she does not need children on the weekend. That was her statement. Also in our culture, we find women who do not choose marriage, and would that more of them would choose SIM. That brings us to question number 2. What is it like to be a consecrated woman in the marketplace? First, the options and expectations noted earlier are in her path as well. And this is where at 8:30 this morning I changed a we to an I. So all I said about employment and expectations above apply. In addition, the consecrated person has answered a special call from God and the church as outlined in Vita Consecrata. In addition, she is to be a sensitive, caring, listening, self-giving woman who participates in the suffering of others, to paraphrase Elizabeth Johnson, a highly regarded theologian of our time. Secondly, she knows that all is mission. All is fulfillment of the lifestyle 24 hours a day. She witnesses to the gospel teaching she has grown to love because they flow from the incarnational Jesus, who has given the example and the opportunity to her. She can look to Armida Borelli's charism, philosophy of life, and virtues, recognizing that 1919 and today, as we approach the new millennium, are different worlds. In these areas, however, she can prayerfully seek her guidance and profit from the way she met the demands and challenges in her life. She trusted in the midst of World War II bombings that took many of her friends, all of her belongings, even precious relics. The consecrated woman can prayerfully study and walk with Claire through her living of the counsel, though her living of the counsels differs in matter but not in spirit. She is to be a witness in all circumstances, often bringing presence when words are ineffective. She is not immune to the chaos, the distractions, the pagan entertainment of the secular world, but she also finds an awe-inspiring world. And I think Sister Claire gave us some conception of that as well yesterday. A world that is a creation of a loving and forgiving God, and so she finds hope in many good persons she encounters. The marketplace gives her creative opportunities for witnessing, for being the missionary SIM and God have called her to be. She is challenged to live a simple Franciscan lifestyle with complete trust that God will provide, that He will always sustain her. And I'm reminded of the Seneca retreats we made in the early years, and after evening prayer, the sisters would say, God did provide, God does provide, God will provide. She is concerned about social justice issues, able to effect change, to empower others, as summarized in a beautiful tape narrated by Elizabeth Johnson, whom Bernard Cook has described as one of the best theologians of our time. A consecrated woman in the marketplace is to be a faithful lover of our good God. She witnesses to gospel values in a compassionate manner. She acknowledges times of loneliness, illness, possible harassment, and even litigation, and non-support by family or others. She has deep gratitude for her Franciscan life and response to God's call as she prays each day the Absorbiar. I beseech thee, O Lord, that the fire and the sweet strength of thy love may absorb my soul from all things that are under heaven, that I may die for love of thy love, as you deign to die for love of my love. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth. I'm going to tell a couple of stories about Ruth, since I have the floor. Ruth made a statement about us not being mothers, and I dispute that. Because Ruth has been my spiritual mother since coming into the Institute. The other thing that I want to mention is that Ruth commented about the number of miles that she's put on her car. When I made profession, she gave me a card, and it said, from our founder on the back, "Go, missionary, go. The whole world belongs to you." But I didn't know what that meant till I got on the Central Council.
That's for sure.
But I learned it from Ruth, so thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Anna Webb. Anna?
Thank you. I think I'll go, missionary, go. When Emma called me, I was in my living room with all my Protestant relatives. I don't have any Catholic relatives, only in New Jersey. So I was delighted, but they said, "Who's that that's calling?" I said, "Oh, a friend of mine." They said, "What's she talking about?" I said, "Oh, it's business." So I finally got them off the subject. But I want you to know that I thought afterwards that this is the story of my life. Now, I know that Nancy Shelley cannot believe that I am sitting up here talking to you. The reason for this is the first time that Nancy helped me with the office. My hands trembled. I couldn't even see the words. I thought, for God's sake, I will never make it. Nancy was of great help to me, and so is Sue Fisher. My life has been a rather protected one. I left home at 17 years of age, the last of 7 children of a hard-shell Baptist family, who I found out the reason why, later I found it out, that they were sending me to a Catholic school was they wanted me to be protected, to be looked over at and watched out for by the nuns. Well, they weren't so happy when I became a convert. I didn't become a convert till after I graduated because I knew that they would pull me out of that school of nursing. So I waited till the day I graduated to tell them that I was going to become a convert. I didn't hear from my family for 3 months. I knew it was hard on them because they thought Catholics had horns. They thought a lot of things about Catholics because I had heard it in the church when I was growing up. I heard it when I was dunked in that pool in the Baptist church. Anyway, upon graduation, the sisters were hard up, and they made me head nurse in the nursery. There were people there that were 20 years older than I, and you can imagine how they felt about this young whippersnapper. It was very difficult. And then they made me pediatric supervisor. Of course, they sent me to school to learn how to be a supervisor, but I didn't learn very much about that in the length of time. I finally went to graduate school in Philadelphia and came back to the same Catholic facility as a faculty member teaching maternal and child nursing for 41 years. I was very happy with my job, and I was interested in young high school students. My goal was, and many of the other people there's goal was, to rank first in the state of the 31 schools in our School of Nursing. Have our School of Nursing be first in the state, especially be University of Virginia and Medical College of Virginia. And we did it for many years. Time flew by, and bang, I found myself a retired woman nurse in the world. I must say this was an awakening. And I remember a letter that I received from Barbara that she told me about this awakening, about when she went out to Albuquerque and she had to make plans for her funeral. I will never forget that letter. Many of the people that I now associate with and I now go to daily mass with confide in me about their physical and family problems. Their physical problems range from cataracts to prostate trouble. Every day. And they're also confiding to me about their children's problems, about their children who have gotten married 1, 2, 3 times, or who are living or have live-ins. I hear this all the time. Well, this was very shocking to me because I had been so protected in such a protective environment in the school. In addition, their children are on drugs and sexually permissive, and they tell me that their children do not respect them, and they, and vice versa, in some situations, do not respect their children. I find that some of them have children that live in the same town who have not called their parents for as many as 3 to 6 months. I can't imagine that because I call my nieces every day. So I just can't imagine that. And that's a long distance call. That's where it goes in my budget. Some parents are really upset, very upset if they're in the community. Some families are dysfunctional. I have one that lives across the street from me. I hear from that every day. And another thing that I think that has really shocked me in the community has been the language. The language of people. But I was reading the other day that language exists in the Congress, that the language exists in the White House, so I guess in our little homes that it exists. Well, anyway, I find that women don't seem to be respected as much as they were a decade ago when I retired. It is my view that men are threatened by women. Now, maybe you all don't agree with me, but it's all right. They see themselves as competing with women. Look at Albright. Wonderful, wonderful. We see this also in sports. We see it in high school. We see it in the colleges. We see it in military settings. You have all of these problems. It has been a threat to men that they have finally found out that women are intelligent.
They're sitting near the door over there.
Quick escape.
A woman today must command respect. It is not given to her because she is a woman. She must be aware of the issues in her community. I would die without my daily paper, and I listen to Congress every day. She must be aware of what's going on in her country and in the world and be actively involved. So what is it like to be a consecrated woman in the marketplace? I think one must have a strong spiritual formation. Well, it was difficult for me to learn the rosary. I could not get used to the rosary because every time I had it, my family would say to me, "What are you doing with those beads?" I think a woman should have a deep spiritual life, and I hope I do. As I am a retired woman, I am involved in the church. I am involved in the ministry to the sick in the hospital. I still go back to that hospital. You wouldn't believe it, but I do. And I also go to the homes. I also call people that are lonely and elderly. And I work with the homeless. I provide transportation to physicians' offices. Now, that's an experience. And to hospitals. I fill out forms for people who can't see how to fill out forms in the waiting rooms of the physician's offices. One would be really amazed at the phone calls I receive concerning health problems. I have not only been a chauffeur, but a patient advocate. Just a few weeks ago, I'd like to tell you a little short story. A friend of mine, well, it was a friend of my niece's really, went to the doctor's office to have her eyes examined. She went back on several occasions, and he always said to her, "Well, everything's going along well." Then on this there, about 3 weeks before I came up here, he said to her, "Well, you're not going to be able to see anymore." And she said, "Well, what's wrong?" And he said, "You have a retina problem." So she went home and cried and cried. And wouldn't you know, I called right at the time she was crying. And her husband says, "She can't talk to you now. She's crying." She said to him, "I can talk to her now. I am going to talk to her now." And I could hear this in the background. So she came to the phone and she told me what had happened. So I said to her, "Who are you going to?" She told me. I said, "How did you check him out?" She said, "I didn't. A neighbor told me about him." I said, "Why didn't you call me?" She said, "I forgot." But anyway, I checked out what was wrong with her. I went and called the operating room of our hospital, And I said, what about this man? And they told me. I said, okay. So I found her a doctor that I knew what kind of problem she had. And she had, as some of you have heard, about the people that have retina problems. And one of the things that I want to say to you is that she has this macular degeneration, and she was very disturbed. But when I took her to the doctor, and he explained another doctor, I looked up through the medical association. I found out through the hospital who was the best in the city. And I took her, I also called him before time and told him I had to talk to him because she was so upset, and for him to be easy with her. And he was. And when he saw her, he said the same thing probably that the other doctor had said in another way, very coldly. He said, you have macular degeneration. She said, well, what are you going to do about it? And he told her what he was going to do. And the next day, he called her at the house, and she went, and she had a checkup again by him, and he was able to stop the bleeding that she had in one eye. And he gave her some hope, because her one eye was in good condition. Well, you know, she thinks I'm an angel right straight from heaven, but she knows I know better, and she knows better too. So the absolute must of a consecrated person, I think, of all of you to know, is that we must be a person of prayer. Now, living alone, you would think you would have time to be a person of prayer. But my telephone rings a lot. Part of it's my fault. I love to talk. One must pray for the church, I think. One must pray for the Pope. God bless him. One must pray for our priest. I am always taking up for our priest. He has so much work to do, and he's the only priest. I'm always handing my friends cards to tell them about priest, to shut them up. I think we need to pray for the religious. I think we need to pray for our secular institutes. And I think we need to pray for our families who comprise the fabric of our society. And families are having a hard time. We must see in our neighbors Christ and have concern for them. For myself, I try to uphold church teachings. I get in a lot of arguments. I explain them when necessary. I do hope in my work that, like John the Baptist, I'm preparing a way for the Lord. I also try to be a grandmother. Now, you know, that is not an easy job. To 3 young children, ages 2 to 8, that don't have a grandmother. Their maternal grandmother was my best friend who died of cancer. Their paternal grandmother died of cancer. As for me, it's a joy that I have been the one that God has chosen to replace these grandmothers. But that is a difficult task. I have been with these children when they have had ear infections, when they have had chicken pox, when they have had pneumonia, enabling the parents to continue to work. When I go home next week, I will go on Monday with one child to a pediatric ophthalmologist. On Wednesday, I go with another child to the hospital for tubes in the ears and an endoidectomy. On Friday, I go with another child to a pediatric neurologist. These are things that I love to do because I'm a pediatric nurse. In conclusion, the path that God has chosen for me has kept my consecrated life alive and joyful. And I am thankful, and I'm thankful for your listening.
Anna reminded me of with her opening statements, what Kathy said yesterday. She's certainly a witness to the spirit of Armida Borelli, being afraid to speak, and speaking so eloquently. And we really appreciate it. As you were talking about your years on the faculty in the nursing school, I was remembering my own academic career. And I could only think as she was talking, because it was obvious how much she loves people, that the students that you had in nursing must have really graduated with a tender care for people, and that you probably have created a whole generation or two of caregivers that made life a lot better for other people. And I was exhausted listening to her. I don't know if I want to retire now or not. Thank you very much, Anna. Next, we're going to hear from Mary Ann Hillard.
Thank you. Since we have a very vast subject area that Emma has given us, in my presentation, I would like to comment on some of the contrasts and the changes that have taken place in relation to my profession. My profession through the years has been that of a bookkeeper. I have worked in business offices for real estate companies, department store, several Catholic parishes, and the business office of a male religious order, and also their vocation office. Presently, I have my own bookkeeping business, and I conduct this business either in my clients' homes or in the office that I have in my apartment. And I'd like to sort of zero in on a few areas because, as I said before, this is such a vast area that we can discuss today. And first, it would be the job market. When I first graduated from high school some years ago, college was not available for financial reasons. And there were very few grants, loans, or scholarships. Secretarial and bookkeeping training was available in the Catholic high school I attended. And so my future profession was practically picked for me. But fortunately, the Lord also knew about this, and my talents were in that area. Today's woman, on the other hand, has a multitude of educational and potential job opportunities. The choices are many, but also the challenges. Even managerial and supervisory level jobs are available in the business world. Many forms of new technology have been introduced through the years for those of us in the business field. And it has required that I learn the computer, the word processor, the fax machine, the cellular telephone, voicemail, and a few others. And for those of us who come from manual typewriters, this is a long way. All of these, as I said, have required a great deal of training and updating, and it's been a real cultural challenge. Through the years, I have worked for male bosses and in a very small office, usually one or two persons. So there has been very minimal advancement possibilities. And I must say that discrimination was, in many areas, of respect, sex, status, and pay. Today, my business dealings are with accountants, lawyers, bankers, and investment brokers, both men and women. And to a large extent, I am respected for my knowledge and my honesty in my business dealings. I am responsible for very large sums of money of my clients. And as a consecrated person, I feel a great deal of responsibility as a steward for this money. Moral conduct is also a real challenge to those of us who are consecrated and work in a business setting. We are placed in many difficult situations with men and women in our workplace. And many of them have different religious beliefs. I was challenged by a Mormon one day saying, "I won't even talk to you unless you can be married inside the sanctuary." We just barely had coffee that day together. And moral conduct often conflicting with ours. So it is a real challenge for many of these areas. The second area I would like to touch upon is attire. Years ago, working in a business office, we had a very strict dress code. I could not wear pants, sandals, and of course you must wear silk hose. In most instances, today's companies are not even allowed to have a dress code. Freedom has its advantages, but also its distinct challenges, especially for the modest woman, and for that is part of our rule. I am the first to admit that pants for a woman has been a distinct advantage in many job situations. And I can remember the day of trying to fix office machines in a skirt. It's not easy. But again, with freedom comes challenge. Friday in Denver is dress down day for all businesses. And jeans are the standard attire for everyone. The tighter, the better. And the companies allow shorts for both men and women. And many think shorter is better. It has required very much courage and explanation to dress casually and yet modestly. And I could name many other situations. I feel we should dress appropriately for the circumstances. I also find that advertising has been a constant challenge for the modest woman. And I personally have challenged the TV stations, the radio stations, and sponsor companies about their ads regarding the offensive way they portray women and areas of violence and language. And I feel it is my duty to speak out. The third area I would like to touch upon is language. And this is one area where I sometimes yearn for the good old days, when males did watch their language in the presence of a woman, at least in the business offices. Now, many women use as much foul language as the men. Immoral and derogatory jokes, verbal harassment, and offensive language have been problems to encounter for many of us in the workplace. I find it a great deal of Christian commitment to speak out in a firm and yet kindly manner regarding my non-tolerance of derogatory and immoral speech. As a consecrated person, our mission is in the workplace, sharing our Christian love and compassion to every person I meet each day, from the neighbor next door to the clerk in the market to the family members and my coworkers. And that often my actions and my words will be countercultural. But this is my SIM challenge. Thank you.
Mary Ann, thanks very much. I'm sure that many of us can relate to a lot of the things that Mary Ann shared about work experience. Interestingly, how over the years you started with limited options for a career, and now women have a lot more opportunities. But there are a lot of other things that go along with the work market, the workplace now, that we didn't encounter. It's not equally as challenging as in the past. And I'm sure that your witness with your clients and in the workplace is very valuable, and it again affirms the purpose for our being in the world. So thank you very much. Next, we're going to hear from Irene.
Thank you, Sharon. Two things that you have to realize before I begin is that for the past 35 years, all of my adult life, I've been either a paid employee or a volunteer in the church. So that's going to color my experiences. As most of you know, I taught for 27 years, junior high school, and then my current position is, with adults. The other thing is that what I'm saying is personal. Much of it is not perhaps the global, experience. And sometimes, well, that's enough said about that. In trying to think of what it means to be a woman today, I reflected back at the previous generation, my mother's generation. And the biggest thing that struck me is how much my life has been influenced by technology. As many of you probably can relate to this, my mother used to spend most of Mondays washing clothes for the 8 of us. I can still smell the soap and the bleach that permeated the air in the kitchen when we came home from school for lunch. She used a scrub board and the sink, filling it innumerable times to rinse and wring out the clothes by hand. She also had to boil the starch and immerse those articles that had to be starched. Then she'd sort and smooth out the clothes before hanging them out to dry. When dry, and of course this is not the winter when they came in like stiff boards and they had to be thawed out, she'd bring them in and fold those that would be put away. Then the next day, usually, she'd sprinkle them with water, roll them up, and set them aside for the water to distribute itself throughout the material. And then that afternoon, she'd begin the task of ironing, leaving handkerchiefs, pillowcases, and other flat items for those of us who were just learning the skill. These were, of course, pre-wash and wear times, and tasks that machines accomplish for us today very handily were both tiring and time-consuming. And of course, in between, there were all those other chores like cleaning the house, shopping, preparing meals, and so on. Another memory of my childhood is seeing my father go out to the iceman's truck to buy a large block of ice, which he would carry up the stairs on his shoulder to put into the ice box that we had on the porch. And of course, the basin under the ice box, those of you remember, had to be emptied regularly as the ice melted. And I can remember the wonder of the first refrigerator we had that only had to be plugged into the electricity to chill or freeze our food. When I was a very young child, our homes were heated by coal, which would be delivered to a basement window and emptied into the cellar. Then the ashes had to be removed periodically from the coal-burning stove and the furnace. I also remember you could go outside and buy fruits and vegetables from a street peddler, and you could get milk and Dugan's bakery items that would be delivered to your door every morning if you so desired. Well, this has all changed, freeing us from tedious manual labor. In my mother's day, most women who worked outside the home were either workers in factories, salespersons, nurses, teachers, or secretaries. Our reading books in school always pictured doctors and pilots, scientists, lawyers, and most working people as male, which I suppose reflected society as a whole in that day. But the interesting thing is that we were conditioned to think that this was the way it should be. Our reading books in school always pictured doctors and pilots, scientists, lawyers, and most working people as male, which I suppose reflected society as a whole in that day. But the interesting thing is that we were conditioned to think that this was the way it should be. Although women today may not have achieved equity in pay with men in many fields, they are found in executive positions in many industries and corporations. But this has not been without cost to them in their personal lives. More women working and not always in high-paying jobs, has made it necessary to leave their children in the care of daycare centers, creating sometimes stress and guilt because they are missing most of the developmental milestones in their children's lives. And most women who are in low-paying jobs are there of necessity, unlike those who are looking for stimulation or a satisfying career. Very often, these women do not have the support of a nuclear family. After work, they come home to find the same household chores, shopping, cooking, etc., waiting to be done. As do men, women today struggle against economic, social, moral, and cultural forces in society. Women have more educational and employment opportunities today, but they and children have paid the price for the sexual revolution that has taken place. Pressure to give work priority over family, control over timing and number of children born and raised, and longer life expectancy all have created problems while solving others. More mothers than not, from my experience in talking to pregnant women who come for baptisms, more of them than not have to go back to work within a month, 8 weeks after their child is born. My niece is a case in point. She has a little son who will be 3 years old in September, and she's expecting twins in November. But she has to be back in work by January. It's not because of consumerism or materialism. Her husband's health insurance doesn't cover her or the children, and her job does. So she sees the necessity of having to go back to work. As Marianne Glendon, of Harvard University Law School has said, society has not found an adequate substitute for the valuable resource it has always taken for granted, the unpaid labor of women. In the church when I was a youngster, women had no role in liturgy. I recall helping 2 sisters in our parish clean the church every Saturday, from washing the altar linens to scrubbing and waxing the church floor. They also taught catechism class during the year and held a vacation Bible class in the summer. Well, we know that today women, both religious and lay, though in our area the former is more prevalent, hold positions even on the archdiocesan level. Women have always been involved in working at lower levels, but now they have titles describing their responsibilities and, in many cases, receiving a salary for that work done. Many are taking advantage of courses offered in the Archdiocesan Seminary, an option not available to them 50 years ago. From the days of having to cover one's head in church, and even a tissue would do, or sometimes even a glove. Yes. Women may now proclaim the word of God as lectors, distribute the body and blood of Christ as Eucharistic ministers, and even be mass servers. Working for my local church has shown me that we have a long way to go before Pope John Paul's appeal sent to the Vatican delegation at the World Conference on Women in Beijing, before these words are taken to heart, namely, that all men in the church undergo, where necessary, a change of heart, and to implement, as a demand of their faith, a positive vision of women, to become more and more aware of the disadvantages to which women, and especially girls, have been exposed, and to see where the attitude of men, their lack of sensitivity or lack of responsibility, may be at the root. Over 3.5 decades, I have seen how the personalities of different pastors have colored their treatment of women employees and volunteers. Men are rarely asked to do the trivial, repetitive tasks as are women. Women are often expected to sacrifice wages when they work for the church. However, accountants, roofers, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, etc., usually men, are paid what their profession dictates. And of course, there are always exceptions to everything I'm saying. I have two friends this past year who have been DREs in their parish for a considerable number of years. And with the coming of the new pastor, their contract was terminated, or they were not renewed, for the simple reason that the pastor wanted to start with a clean slate. I question the justice of this. And of course, although there may be no official dialogue about it, girls may dream about becoming priests. Something one never even thought about when I was growing up. Perhaps in the future, when youngsters who have grown to adulthood with raised consciousness about being fully human, male and female, without having to get rid of the baggage of previous generations, when they become leaders in the church, the equality of the sexes will be a reality in the church. This seems to be a time of change, with many men and women struggling with roles in the church as well as in society. But along with the above should come a better understanding of what service for both men and women truly means, including leadership as service at all levels. For what it means for me to be a consecrated woman today, I took this very personally, what it means to me. I feel that consecration means joy in being called to serve the Lord and his people with single-hearted purpose. To know that by my consecration, my being gives glory to God. Joy also in knowing that I am supported in prayer and presence by other women who strive every day to be faithful to their commitment also. It means knowledge that each missionary scattered throughout the world is working, often quietly and obscurely, to build up the kingdom in her part of the world, even as I do my small part here. It means simplicity of lifestyle for me. I don't get caught up with the world's pursuit of possessions. There's always the temptation to fit in with the crowd, but by indulging myself, but sometimes I am called to give witness by being countercultural. It means developing my talents and sharing my gifts instead of hiding them or denying that God has been generous to me. It means confidence in knowing that the Spirit of God is always present in me, whether I'm mindful of it or not. That Spirit is working through me to accomplish whatever I am meant to do. It means that although I have relatively few concrete obligations stemming from my vow and promises, I am challenged to live the spirit of poverty, chastity, and obedience so that they influence my whole life. Being consecrated today for me also means being fully immersed in creation, identifying and reaching out to those who are poor in reality and in spirit, the alienated, the outcasts, both literally and figuratively, without judgment, but with love and concern, not always an easy task. It is understanding the interdependence of all of God's creation and my role as a steward in the world of that creation. So whether I'm listening to someone who wants to share their joy, sorrow, grief, anger, or facilitating a discussion group, or preparing parents for baptism, or instructing an RCIA group, or caring for my father, all are part of my mission as a consecrated woman. However, even when illness or other circumstances make it impossible for me to be active, my handling of these situations also has an effect on those around me, sometimes calling forth from them virtues they possess. Finally, there is freedom in knowing that I don't have to identify myself by what I do, but rather by who I am. One called by God to be consecrated, that is, to be set apart for service to the Lord and his people, and to be a sign of God's love to all in the world. Thank you.
So we've gone from Davenports and ice boxes to today, huh? As you were talking, I was thinking of several things. You brought to us a very clear picture of the role of women and how it has changed over time, especially in the workplace. And recently, I did a presentation for the EA meeting on women's work in the United States. And in my research for that, I made some discoveries that I thought were still rather astounding. One was that, first of all, 46% of the workforce in the United States is women. And that a survey was done by the Department of Labor last year. 250,000 women across multiple jobs were surveyed for a variety of areas. The number one issue for them was stress. And it was stress for those, particularly women in the ages around 40, who were in management positions because of the value conflict that they were dealing with. And the second was amongst young married women who were having conflicts related to home and work. The other issue that I found very interesting was that 25%, women are still paid 25% less than men for equal jobs. So thanks for bringing that up, because we have a lot of work to do in the workplace in supporting ourselves and other women. Next, we're going to hear from Jane.
What is it like to be a woman today? Now, you've heard this. It was brought home to me in college when I had to write some poetry for a literature class, that writing from personal.
Can you speak louder?
What is it like to be a woman today? Can you hear me? It was brought home to me in college when I had to write some poetry for a literature class that writing from personal experience goes much easier. So to answer this question, I will share a few thoughts concerning the ordinary life my mom had, raising my brother, sister, and me, and to what it is like in a typical situation in a 90s household. A woman today might have 2 kids, carefully planned after the house and career are established. She searches out a nanny or a daycare close to where she lives or works and enrolls her children. My mom was always home. A career, even though my mom went to college, was not her choice, nor was it the common experience of the times. The modern woman pays close attention to fashions, hairstyles, fitness programs, educational, leisure, and cultural advantages. With only a single income, Mom carefully budgeted everything and took pleasure in an occasional social outing or get-together with neighbors, and we were mostly included. There was no preschool, Montessori, or even kindergarten required at that time, and I don't remember Mom even shopping for clothes for herself. With the fast-paced life of a woman today, balancing husband, job, and kids, she takes advantage of all the modern inventions that she can possibly find. Microwaves, the built-in vacuum systems, dishwashers, garbage disposals, self-cleaning ovens, frost-free refrigerators, cellular phones, vans, and computers, to name a few. I remember Mom being excited when anything new came into our house to save time or energy, but these conveniences were few and far between. Life seemed more peaceful for women during my growing up years. Now women have to be much more concerned with issues such as rape, domestic abuse, and forms of discrimination in the workplace, in church, and in society in general. Today's women are very much in the forefront in their contributions to science, government, the church, in all aspects of human endeavor. Secretarial work, nursing, teaching, and social work were acceptable careers during my mom's time. Breaking into other fields was frowned upon, limited, and discouraging. Women today work hard on issues such as equal pay for equal work, access to good child care for working parents, equality within marriage. The major premise that men and women are different is now changed to the concept of equality for both sexes. When considering then what it is like to be a woman today, such titles come to mind as businesswoman, world traveler, globally aware of issues of today, leaders exercising roles of power and authority, and foremost, being very visible in the marketplace. Yet still mothers and nurturers of the next generation. To live as a consecrated woman in the marketplace is to first be concerned with an ever-deepening relationship with God and then reaching out in service to others. The consecrated woman in today's world engages in all temporal affairs. I've pointed out that the modern woman does this very prominently and successfully. But the consecrated woman is to seek the kingdom of God and all that she is a part of in society. She tries to direct temporal affairs according to God's will. The consecrated woman in the marketplace is involved in all the work and business of ordinary life and the everyday circumstances of social and family life. As a consecrated woman, she is called by God and led by the Spirit of the gospel to contribute in any way she can to the sanctification of the world. She acts as a leaven from within to demonstrate and effect growth according to Christ's teachings. We are responsible as consecrated people to read the signs of the time and then interpret them in the light of the gospel. We are as instruments in the world, and that is a challenge in our present environment where the focus is on profit, personal gain, and competitiveness. We have to check often. Are we blindly following the times? Are we in the world but not of the world? We do our best where we are planted, and we leave the rest to God. Thank you.
Again, showing the value of our witness in the workplace. We have seen that in the work world, we're involved in every aspect of work just as any other worker would be. And we've come from an era where life was much simpler than it is now. And I think one of the things that you've mentioned, though you didn't say it outright, was that our spirit of poverty is something that can be very valuable in the marketplace because of all of the materialism that we're experiencing today. So thank you very much, Jean. Kathy is up next. Thank you.
I'm up next. I'm also at the end of the table, close to the door.
Along with the men.
I wasn't in the military for 20 years for nothing. I learned. I'm privileged to have been asked. When Emma asked me and she told me what the questions were, my first thought was, I don't have a clue about what it's like to be a woman today in the world. I said, because I don't think of myself when I work in those terms. But, certainly, at least the last time I looked, last physical exam, doctor said you are, and I said, okay. So I have to accept it on faith that I'm a woman in the world. My grandmother, my mother's mother, worked in a sweatshop in New York City when she was 13 or 14 years of age. When child labor laws, she was afraid to be found out because of the child labor laws were new, and she needed the money. When my mother came of age and left home, she was able to select a profession, nursing, which was pretty traditional for women, but still, it was still, you either married or you went to the convent. When I came of age, I joined the military. I tried to get into the convent. The sisters wouldn't have me, so I did the next best thing. I joined the Foreign Legion. I didn't speak French, so I had to join the Air Force. And I did that, and that's where, I found my way. It's interesting, too, because Anna Webb and I have a very unique connection. My mother is a classmate of hers. And they used to pull some real good shenanigans when they were in nursing school. So if they ever tell you, she ever tells you, if her halo looks a little too centered, have her tell you about some of the things they used to pull as student nurses. They had a lot of fun, but that's another story. That's their story. But the family I came from, my parochial school education, the job that I do, my temperament, my joys and fears, these are things that have formed me. When I entered the Institute, and that's a fun story in itself, because Anna was a part of that. That was really funny. The reason it's funny is that even today, I can still see myself telling Anna well, yeah, well, sort of. And then Margie calling me and say, I hear you're interested. Well, yeah, well, sort of, And wait a minute, Margie, for dinner that night, or later on, 2 or 3 weeks later, Margie said, well, we'll meet for dinner and then we'll talk. I said, great. And Anna had said, well, maybe she'll be able to help you with finding a job. So I went to meet Margie for 2 really practical reasons. I was looking for work and I wanted to eat. After we started talking, I forgot about the job and I didn't eat much of dinner. And I found a vocation. And that was the important part. What I experienced early on, because that's part of my consecration to the marketplace, as a woman in the marketplace, is, like St. Francis, I can really see why he got his wire screwed a little bit. When the image of Christ when Christ spoke to him through the cross, and he said, rebuild my church. I can understand that he thought it meant the physical structure, because that's, as a new person in the Institute, I thought my job was to be lector and Eucharistic minister and parish council secretary and all those kinds of things. I thought I was a human doer, and that's what I was supposed to be. I was supposed to be productive, get things done, get in there and make a difference. And I don't mean to demean that, because a lot of you, and I've done it still, a lot of you are still doing that kind of thing. And it's terrific, and it's a way to serve. So please don't misunderstand that. By no means do I demean that way of serving God and serving His church. But that was a very limited concept for me. And it proved limited as life went on. Not because I didn't like serving those capacities, but I saw myself only in those capacities. I saw my consecration only within the context of that, and maybe those limited occasions at work where I made a difference for somebody. And under those occasions, I felt very, very good about my witnessing as a consequence of my consecration. So life has some funny twists and turns. And Father's talk and his repeated reference, and I'll blame it on Father. Blame is a good thing. You can do it. It's free. You can do it to anybody. On giftedness and this idea of being gifted and giving gift to others. I have a little prejudice with the choices that women have today. And my prejudice is this, is that with all the choices we have available to us, and the younger women who are just beginning to think about careers, there are 2 things that I think remain stable. And that is that what God gives to me, what God gives me is his gift to me. What I give back to him is my gift to God. And that's true regardless of the profession or the circumstance I find myself in. So I take the gifts he gives me and then I return them to him in whatever I do. And that has literally become almost anything and everything I do. I don't see my consecration limited in any way, shape, or form. But it's taken some very unique turns in the last few years, and unique from a very personal standpoint. When Father talked about giftedness early on this week, I saw an element of giftedness that I've experienced in the last few years that I would have never seen early in my life as a missionary. And that's okay, because what I was feeling and thinking and doing then was exactly what I needed to do. I have absolutely no remorse in terms of how I saw life then, because it's exactly where I was supposed to be. How I see life today has been formed by those other experiences. What do I see as gift, and how do I give it? Let me share something with you here that I brought with me that will help lead me into what I believe is my giftedness, not only to you, but in the marketplace. And it has changed how I perceive myself as a woman who's consecrated in the marketplace. Kathy, in my wisdom, I have selected you from among the men and women in the world to be the purveyors of my goodness in selecting you to work and to bring around this phenomenon of goodness in the world. I went not to the proud, the mighty, the famous, or the brilliant. I went instead to the humble, to the sick, to the unfortunate. I went straight to the alcoholic, you, Kathy. Well, he might have said to me, unto your weak and feeble hands I have entrusted a power beyond estimate. To you has been given that which has been denied to the most learned of your fellows, not to scientists or statesmen, not to wives or mothers, not even to my priests or ministers, unless they themselves are alcoholics. Have I given this gift of healing other alcoholics which I have entrusted to you? It must be used unselfishly. It carries with it a grave responsibility. No day can be too long, no demands upon your time too urgent. It must be used with tolerance, for I have restricted its application to no race, no creed, no denomination. Personal criticism you must expect. Lack of appreciation will be common. Ridicule will be your lot. Your motives will be misjudged. You must be prepared for adversity. For what men call adversity is the ladder you must ascend. You must ascend the rungs toward spiritual perfection. And remember, in the exercise of this power, I shall not exact from you beyond your capabilities. Kathy, you were not selected because of your exceptional talents. And be careful always, if success attends your efforts, not to ascribe to personal superiority that which you can claim only by virtue of my gift. If I had wanted learned men to accomplish this mission, their power would have been entrusted to the physician and scientist. If I had wanted eloquent men, there would have been many anxious for the assignment. For talk is the easiest used of all the talents which I have endowed mankind. If I had wanted scholarly men, the world is filled with better qualified men and women than you, who would be available. You were selected because you have been the outcast of the world, and your long experience as an alcoholic has made or should make you humbly alert to the cries of distress that come from the lonely hearts of alcoholics everywhere. Keep ever in mind the admission you made on the day of your profession in Alcoholics Anonymous, namely that you are powerless, and it was only through your willingness to turn your life and your will over to me, unto me, keeping that relief, unto my keeping, that relief came to you. That's my gift, and that's the gift that I give, that I share. And it's interesting because when I entered the Institute, I thought my gift, not that I excluded my frailties and my vulnerability and my shortcomings, but I never thought that my giftedness, my real giftedness, would come from the most embarrassing, the most shameful weakness that at the time of early recovery that I thought that could be. But it's that gift of vulnerability, because I've experienced that. It's the gift of having felt shame and guilt as a result of my drinking. It's the gift that I give to other recovering alcoholics who themselves are feeling those same feelings, who don't understand that God loves them and cares for them in a very special way. Because I have embraced the grace that God gave me as a result of that recovery, I bring not only the promise, but the reality of God's love in every person I meet, whether they're a recovering alcoholic or not, whether they're actively drinking or not. My work in the office involves meeting, obviously, a lot of people. I've had 4-star lawyers share with me the fact that their retarded brother had to die first before their mother could feel like they could let go. I've had people cry. I've had people give me a hug. I've had people share things that they don't share with their own families. Because as you know, our Lord speaks to me through this, my own experience tells me that I have no place standing above another. My place as a consecrated woman is joining my own woundedness with the woundedness of the world. And that's the gift I give. St. Paul, to kind of bring this to a close, really synthesized for me the gift that God has given me. The disease is not a gift, trust me. It's not a gift. but the recovery is. The recovery is very much a gift. Sin is not a gift, but recovery from sinful behavior is a gift. In fact, there's an analogy that I found in a book that I thought really showed that how our fracturedness and such can be actually, part of our pathway to God. And the author described our connection to God as being by a single string. And at each time we sin, we sever that string. But God in his love forgives us, and he reties the string. Each time we sin, each time we make a mistake, that line is severed. Each time we do that, he ties the knot again and restores the connection. But paradoxically, with each sin, with each mistake, with each misstep that we take, and the string gets a little shorter because the knot shortens the string, we get a little closer to God. And I thought that's a beautiful analogy. It doesn't mean we should all go out there and not This is not permission to go out there and do some more sinning on the way to lunch. But it does explain where we are an avoidance society. Avoid mistake, see perfection as something that we can attire. None of us are perfect. I'm not perfect. There's no way that I'm going to be perfect at much of anything. Until the day I die, then I'll be perfectly dead. And from that, the Lord will do with me, as he already is. He's doing with me as he wants. But I can tell you that this is not the apostle that I would have chosen. I can assure you that when I entered the Institute and when Barbara started to talk to me, one of the things she did not say was, Kathy, at some point you might want to consider becoming an alcoholic. Because then you can really serve the church. If we had that conversation, I missed it. And I apologize to her. But it is the hand that I've been dealt. It's what I am. I'm Kathy. I'm a woman. I'm 5 feet something. I weigh something. My hair is sort of brown with a little gray now. I've earned the gray. I've got that there. I have a profession, and I'm an alcoholic. That's what I am. I can't deny that any more than I cannot deny my age. Those are realities. I can't change that. We kid in AA that we were all once cucumbers, and now we're pickles. So I've decided that I'm going to be the best relish there is. But I alluded to an excerpt from St. Paul. And I listened to this at Mass some, 2-3 years ago. And I said, this is speaking to me as a consecrated woman who is in recovery. It told me that not only was, my recovery okay with my consecration, it was how I, as a consecrated woman, was going to serve God. But first I had to see that within myself, because I can't give what I don't see in myself. And it comes from 2 Corinthians, and I've got the other particulars here if you would like to check this out for yourself. Although if I should wish to boast, I would not be foolish, for I would be talking the truth. But I refrain, so that no one may think more of me than what he sees in me, or hears from me, because of the abundance of the revelations. Therefore, that I may not become too elated, a thorn in the flesh was given me, an angel of Satan to beat me, to keep me from being too elated. 3 times I begged the Lord about this, that it might leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. I will rather boast most gladly of my weaknesses, in order that the power of Christ may dwell within me. Therefore I am content with my weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and constraints, for the sake of Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. If I don't allow my myself as a person, as a human being, to connect with the world, I have no way to serve. And that's how I see my witness. Thank you.
You really touched me with your story. I think we all need to be aware of our own woundedness, and that it is out of our woundedness that we can be sensitive to other people. And obviously your witness in your job is very powerful, just as it